Hello, welcome to this week's Loose Links. Join us as we talk the hottest debates in Lincolnshire and around the world. And we have a brand new panellist too. Make sure you join us tonight on Loose Links. Keeping me and you entertained for the next hour and having that evening chit chat. Joining me, Nicholas James, is Rachel Penny.
Hiya.
Penny that never bloody stops coming, and a cat corner.
Hi.
Good evening. As we talk about this evening, red tape, as people are finding red tape as they're trying to get donations over to Ukraine, but they are facing red tape. So we discussed, is it still important to have that red tape policy, or should we get rid of it completely? Also, sad news this week, as we send big condolences to Brenda Edwards, the Loose Woman star, who lost her son tragically to an illness. But when you are told news about a friend, should you keep it stum? And is it your news to tell? And we finish on the subject of Lincoln Cathedral Lent and what we've given up. There's some stories behind there. All that on tonight's show. Good evening, panel.
Hello. Evening.
How are we all? Cat, we haven't seen you in a while. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
It's been a while. Rachel, I can't say the same for you. How have you been?
Yes, I've aged, haven't I?
Just aged a little bit. Still rocking that Robinson though. Absolutely rocking it.
No, that's getting a bit tired now, Nick.
Panel. We are usually a panel of 4, and that doesn't change us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brand new panellist on Loose Links, and she's ready to talk, and believe me, she can do it. Please welcome to her hot seat, Zoe Keating. Hi, Zoe!
Hello.
Hi, welcome to Loose Links. How are you?
Thanks, Nick. I'm good, thank you, lovely. I'm honoured to be here and I'm looking forward to it.
Have you watched many shows?
A few.
Oh, good. Are you ready to start your debate? Are you ready to have Zoe's voice heard?
Certainly am.
As we talk about this evening, as I've said, we start on the subject of polls from last week. Remember, it's your show as well as ours. You're the 5th panel member out there. So polls this week were COVID restrictions lifted. Will you still be carrying a face mask for you? I can't say that word.
Foreseeable.
Yeah, well done, Rachel. Future. 72% of you said yes. 14% of you said no, and 14% of you said other. Was there another answer as well, Rach?
There was, yeah, but I'm on my phone at the moment, so
you can't read it. You can't read it. Second poll: do you believe an animal has to be allowed to live as a natural intended without human? Oh, you use huge words, Rachel. With human.
That being humanised, but that being humanised.
Then 64% of you said no, 27% of you said yes. In third poll, in flirting, harmless banter when talking to others whilst out with your partner. 63% of you said no, 37% of you said yes. So we've got some mixed polls this evening, mixed polls. But are we ready to talk, ladies? Rachel, are you ready to give your view?
Yes, just had my volume.
Join us as we talk about the first topic this evening. Is groups across Scotland are collecting donations for Ukraine are facing Political challenges in getting the goods to those in need. Organisers face red tape to get shipments through customs and some fundraising to pay for the transport costs over. Charities have appealed for cash donations so they can get the right help to people quickly. Rachel, what do you think of red tape, and do you think it's still important to have it?
Well, I think rules and regulations for certain things, yes, but when the Disasters Emergency Committee bring out, you know, they have the ability to quash some of this red tape, I'm sure, because it's usually, these rules and regulations are made by people that don't really understand the job. They're usually by politicians that don't understand the nature of what they're putting these rules and regulations enforcing for. You know, it's I don't think it's always applicable, but I do think there should be something in place for emergencies like this that we're facing at the moment with Ukraine to make it a smoother journey.
Potentially leading on from that, what it should be is that rather than having, as Rachel was saying, rules and regulations made by politicians, maybe the politicians should be seeking help from, say, in this instance, people who are engaging in humanitarian work. They should be making the top people in that area should get together and make the rules and regulations about that. Maybe in education, it should be teachers who are making the rules and regulations about that, so that the rules and regulations and the red tape is actually there for the benefit of keeping people safe but still allowing things to happen easily rather than hindering people, because, as Rachel said, people are making rules without actually understanding what needs to happen.
Yeah, quite.
Well, to be honest, it makes me angry. I'm quite cross about it, really, because we're not talking about, I don't know, we're not talking about voting for the next MP. We're not talking about what Boris is doing in his house at the moment. We're talking about human beings dying, literally crying out to be saved and to be heard. And these top dogs have to have their say on how donations get over and who has the right, who has made them God, who has said to them, actually, we'll help this country out, we'll help this, but we'll have rules and we'll lay stuff down and stuff like that. When it comes to charity work, you've done a lot of charity work in the past, Zoe. When it comes to charity work, do you think all red tape should just disappear?
Absolutely, especially when in crisis, because, you know, we're all supportive and we'll do all club together and we'll do all come together. But in instances like this, it's a crisis. I mean, where, you know, they're shouting out for all this money, can you help us, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, where's this money going to come from? Because we're all individually fighting a war somewhere of our own. So, yeah, get rid of it. It's absolutely, it's disgusting in my eyes anyway. But not only that, you know, there's never any goal setting. How much money do you need? You know, when we get to this point, you know, what's the outcome from this? It's, you know, a revolving door, isn't it?
It just stalls the good that's happening, doesn't it? It just stalls it, and we can't stall the help in this crisis, not at all.
But do you think it goes back to what we've discussed in the show before? Do you think it goes back to, because it's not? So when we talk about the big wigs, when we talk about, because it's always this in any business that you work in, isn't it? It's always the hierarchy that you go for first, because they're not down on the ground working and stuff like that. But do you think it still comes back to what we've talked about in this show? Let's hand it over to you, Rach. Do you think that when it doesn't actually affect our lives and is not affecting us, that makes our judgment very different to the people that are actually suffering? So if the bigwigs actually went over there, witnessed what was going on, poverty, death, illness, all of that happening at the moment, do you think they would have a very different decision on what red tape they've led?
I do, yes. But also personally, it's human nature. People like Zoe that does a lot of good work for charities. I'm a bit of a coward. I like to do a sponsored something or other, do personally something like that to make a benefit, but it's very minimal what I do. I'm more of a hider behind the settee, really. I'd give some money, I'd help out like that way, but I wouldn't want to know what people are going through. I'm a bit of a coward like that. I'm escapism because I can't deal with it. I can't deal with the trauma. So these people that are putting themselves forward, these politicians that do make these rules and have ideas that are not really on the ground level, that's actually going to benefit these people that are in crisis. I do think if they are in a job that they are supposed to be helping these people, they should be doing something on the ground and going over there to see what's happening. And it's a very difficult situation because I wouldn't want to do it myself. But there are people who are more capable than I would be. But sorry, Zoe.
No. Well, yeah, you're right. If they're, willing to put their face to these red tapes, then get on the floor, get, on the football and actually experience what they're going through so that they can get the insight. And then maybe they could actually unravel this because they'll have the insight and be able to validate the uplift of the red tape. That's what I say.
Rachel, I've sort of got to disagree with you a little bit as well, only on the point that you say you're a little bit of a coward and all you do is you like to give a little bit of money. Well, as you've made very aware to the show in many shows of disability and stuff like that, and I'm sure you won't mind me talking about it, but Rachel has Parkinson's. And actually, I think you don't give yourself enough credit, actually, Rachel, because you did that massive hike, didn't you? Can you remember you did it for charity where you walked for days and days on end, and actually your body ached from that, but you carried on and you kept going.
Well, I was in hospital twice, actually.
Yeah.
but they're all quite trivial compared to big humanitarian crises like this. They are quite trivial. Drop in the ocean, but
if everybody thought like that, every person helps, Rach. Everything is massive.
Yeah, and but there wasn't a great deal of red tape where I was going. It was more like bandages and crutches. But you know what I mean. Something as big and as vast as what we're talking about today, needs more of a streamlined route to benefit everybody. And I think there should be red tape has to be necessary sometimes for rules and regulations for things so they don't get out of control. But I do think that it's something when it needs to be done, something needs to be done immediately because of life and death situations like it is now. Then I think that red tape should be just cut straight down the middle and there should be an easy access.
But it's sad that, go on, Zoe, what was you going to say?
No, yeah, I agree with Rach. Under certain circumstances like this while in crisis, then let us have those margins.
Well, I just Zoe, let me come over to you because you do a lot of charity work, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about you on your loose journey as we go through shows and understand what you do a little bit more. But do you find when you do something, it's always the big important people that you come to a brick wall with? Do you find that you're always battling when it comes to that?
There's always going to be policy and procedure, always around everything, and it's there for a reason, to reduce risk and, to make sure that everybody's staying safe within whatever their outcomes are aimed to be achieved. However, it's about identifying how we can resolve these situations to have a positive impact and outcome. And while these things continue, like the red tape and etc., and like we say, I'm always battling, but the way I get around that is I make sure that I identify the policy and procedure and then sort of maneuver around it to make sure I'm still within the lines to meet my goals. But I mean, there's a long way to go.
It's hard, isn't it? And Kat, let's come over to you. Do you think that we are a nation at the moment where we work as a nation where we're just looking out for me, myself and I. So I feel like COVID was the first. I remember being in school, right, and you hear about the First World War and you learn about the Second World War and and you learn about history that happened. But it never really got me here. It never touched my heart. And I think it's because, to me, I know thousands of people out there that have been through it. This is just my opinion, but to me it was a story. To me it was something that I'd heard that happened. I wasn't there, I didn't witness it, I didn't go through the emotions and feelings. And I think COVID gave everybody an opportunity where we can all join as a nation and talk about, well, can you remember COVID? And everybody's had that feeling and that experience and that illness and that fear and that death and all of that all combined together. But do you think if it doesn't actually affect us, Kat, do you think we find it harder to relate?
I think most, in most things, humans do find it quite difficult if it's not actually happening to you, because you can be sympathetic, but trying to actually understand how someone is thinking and feeling, it's physically impossible to actually get into someone's head and know what it's like. Even if you're having a very similar situation, someone could, because they're that person, react quite differently. And you can put yourself in that, you can put yourself as close to that situation. But if you're going to go back home to, you can go out to say, the politicians could go out to Ukraine and see what's happening, but ultimately they're going to go home and go to a nice warm bed at the end of the day. Even if they went to, I know there's some things that people do, like with homeless people, where they go out onto the street and, to raise money and awareness, sleep rough for a night, but you still know that at the end of that night, you're going to go back to your bed the next day. So it's very difficult to actually, know what it feels like unless you've actually sort of been in that situation. And
Kat, I absolutely 100% agree with you, because I won't say which charity it is, because that's not fair, but I've done that outside all night asleep. I've slept rough. But then when I reflected, and I did it for a couple of years, and Zoe, you might really disagree with me here, but I did it for a couple of years, and I felt at the end of it, I stopped doing it, because I just thought it was a bit of a mickey take, that I was sleeping rough for a night and then going home to a warm bed the next night. Now, if they changed it to the point of where they said, right, we're not gonna make you sleep outside, but what we'd like you to do is walk the streets for a night, for a whole night, from 6 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, and talk to the people that are there day in, day out, night after night. Sit, find out their stories a little bit more, see if you can lead them in the direction of any help. You've got to be really careful with charity work, that you don't offend people that are actually suffering with it. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree, because it can come across as patronising, because, a lot of people are probably sat there thinking, well, what was the outcome from that? Did they set up a homeless refuge? Where did that money go? What happened? But yeah, you've got a great point there, because actually if you did walk the streets and you did talk to these people and you did get to know them and you identified their needs, their wishes, their preferences, then maybe we could put some more support in place during that night while raising that money, and then identifying what the needs were and putting that in place moving forward with the money raised.
Do you think also with charity, Rachel, let's go to you, do you think also with charity that in a sort of way we are drawn to charities more when they've affected us personally? So I know from your experience, Rachel, I won't go too deep, but I know from your experience, you've been very drawn to Alzheimer's, and you've been very drawn to Parkinson's, charity Parkinson's, because you suffer yourself. But do you think we are led to charities that have touched our hearts a lot
Oh,
more than
definitely.
charities out there.
Definitely, you work harder, because if it's something that you've experienced yourself or your family's experienced, it can be so devastating at times that you want to do as much as you possibly can for it. I've done things for other charities as well. For cancer charities, which affects absolutely everybody. Cancer does, and I do. But you usually go for it hell for leather, I think, if you are affected by it. When you said about the homeless charity, I did that, stopped out all night around the cathedral but we were given bacon butties halfway through the middle of the night, cardboard to sit on. We weren't kicked and weed on or anything like that, or we went in to go warm our hands in the loo heat air dryers, but it was something to do. It's a dangerous world out there. You wouldn't want to go and chat to people on the street in the middle of the night, because it's not something that they want to do, and it really can be. But that can touch everybody. Homelessness and cancer, they're two biggest things that affect probably a lot more people than you think.
I wouldn't say, Rachel, go out as a single person. So say like that group.
You've got to have some knowledge before you go out.
But say that instead of you sleeping around, because I know that charity. We won't name charities tonight, but I know that charity that sleeps around the cathedral. But there's always a lot of people there. Now, instead of sleeping around the cathedral and warming your hands up and having a bacon butty, what's stopping that group of people walking together the streets of Lincoln and talking to or the streets of Newark or the streets of Grantham or the streets of Boston, talking to the people that actually are suffering day in, day out and have no choice but to be in that situation? We always, I had, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I was on a lunch break from a work job. It's not a job that I do anymore. And I walked past this homeless guy, and this guy looked up to me and said, do you have any spare change? And I said, no, but I have a spare 10 minutes. And I just sat and spoke to him. I just sat and talked and said, how's your day been? There was a bit of distance. I didn't sit right next to him. How's your day been? Have you managed to get anything to eat, anything to drink? Really, just talk to him for 10 minutes. And I said at the end of it, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to go back to work now. And I went to get change from my pocket, and he said, no. And I went, no, don't be silly. You're asking for money. And he went, no, you've been the only person today that's made me feel like I'm a human being. And I think that's really, really important. Now, I'm not asking people out there to stop homeless people and to have a full-on conversation. But imagine yourself sat on the ground, thousands of people walking past you day in, day out, like you're a rat. Like there's nothing, you're absolutely rubbish. All you have to do is look at somebody and say, good morning, and just walk past. You don't need to say anything else. Good afternoon, or hiya, you're right. Just acknowledging that person, that they are human. Zoe, tell us a little bit about how you started charity work.
So I wouldn't be sat here today being a mental health advocate if it weren't for the fact that I've got lived experience within that field. I had a breakdown back in 2016, ended up on an acute mental health ward here in Lincoln at the Peter Hodgkinson Centre. But can I just quickly go back to around the homelessness, because you made a really valid point there, and so did you, Rachel. I mean, realistically, do people on the streets get a bacon butty every night, from these charities? And yeah, by not judging people, I mean, I was homeless and I don't want to take it away from people on the street, because that is absolutely horrific. I was lucky and I was placed into a B&B with my son, because under the circumstances I fled a risky situation at the time. But that's how I came into doing a lot for charity work, because then I was driven because I seen the impact of all environmental factors on people on the ward within their lives. So coming from homelessness, some of them, the actual horrific things that have happened to people from being in that situation, and then them losing their sense of identity, sense of purpose, self-esteem, because like you say, they was judged from being on the street, and also then they had to live with the impact of the uncertainty of their future, and it's sad. So that's what drives me, because nobody should judge anybody, because you know what, we're all a payback away from being homeless.
A wise friend told me, actually I will name her because she's a panellist, Sue Humphrey, once said to me, we should always think about, I don't know if you've ever heard this, Zoe, but we should always think about that no matter where you are in life, you can be the Queen, but the Queen's obviously a little bit more protected than all of us, but you are always 3 stages away from being homeless. No family, no friends, no money. And no matter where you are in life, those 3 things can collapse at any point. And some people will go, oh, they've got themselves there and it's their fault and they shouldn't have drunk. And I don't judge people that are on the streets that drink or take drugs, because the thing is, it's an escapism.
Yeah. How would you deal with it? You don't know unless you've been in that situation. That's why I'm big on people who have got lived experience within these situations, because they are the best advocates, you know?
But remember, you're the Viz panel member out there. Tell us what you think. Do you think red tape should be cut for charity work? And actually, should the big wigs be flying over and getting personal experience from the tragedy that is happening in our world? Make sure you have your say too. We go on to a bit of a solemn subject now, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we'd like to send our biggest condolences to Brenda Edwards out there, Loose Women's Star, as she suddenly lost, Loose Women's Star, and Broadway star to Hairspray, as she tragically lost her son suddenly from an illness. Loose Women's Star Brenda Edwards has bravely broken her silence following the devastating death of her son Jamal. It was reported on Sunday night that the 31-year-old had passed away suddenly. Now, Brenda has confirmed the heartbreaking news and spoken about the cause of her son. Let's go to you first, Kat. It says in the report that the news of her son and the sharing was taken away from her. Do you believe if somebody tells you a story or something quite personal to them, that actually it's not your story to share, even if you've heard it?
I think it's definitely not, you shouldn't be sharing someone else's story, particularly, using it as gossip with their name and, any personal, specific details. I think sometimes, particularly if you know that person, they might be okay with it if you anonymise them, anonymise the situation. And if it's there to help someone who's going through a similar situation to them, if you knowing of that person, they would be okay with it, then that would be okay. But it really depends on who the person who's told you and how you then tell that information, and definitely keeping, making sure that it's not done as gossip. You're not going, oh, did you hear about this person? It's very much if you are going to use it, it's very much as a helping tool, so that you can use that person's experience to help someone who's potentially going through something else that's, similar.
Go on, Rach, what was you going to say?
I think with this, like with Brenda, when you're in the public eye, and her son was as well, he was, he when somebody takes that news and puts it in, and it's in the public eye interest anyway, I think as a mother, it must have been absolutely excruciating for the day after for her to have to come out and publicly confirm her own son's death. So it was the report was right and correct right from the beginning. But to be forced into that situation must have been unbearable. Absolutely unbearable. I don't know how she did it, quite honestly.
Well, I just think even a normal, well, I was about to say normal human being, but not in the celebrity world. I know for me personally, there's work life and then there's personal life. And I think that when it comes to, I think sometimes obviously we're all human and we dip into both worlds occasionally. We dip into personal and professional life all the time. And as four of us sat here tonight, Loose Links is all about us being professional sharers. And you cannot do this show without being personal, without saying your own personal experience and your own personal view. You can't just give a generic answer to every, believe me, I've tried, to every question that I throw out to the panel. But I do think that it was, I really, really felt for Brenda. And I know that he's in the public eye, and I know that he's very looked upon, and there was cameras. There's always a camera on Brenda Edwards. There's always something going on about her. But actually, to take that saddening news and that heartbreaking story away from her, that other people shared it on social media, that she had no choice but to step out in front of the camera and say, the day after she lost her son. So she's dealing with a daughter as well. She's dealing with family. She's dealing with the acceptance of it and all of that. And to be faced in front of a camera. Do you think we're too hard on our celebrities, Zoe?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a baseline of respect, isn't it? You know, when something so horrific like that, coming from a mother's perspective as well, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And if they could just have that sort of boundary rectified so that people that are going through that grievance process, you know, do have that respect. And people just need to be more mindful as well around that situation. Yeah, I agree with you totally, Nick.
I have got
red tape with that then, do you?
There you go.
There's no red tape. There's no red tape there, is there?
No.
Exactly.
No.
And in that sense, who is it actually, the press telling the world about, someone's son who's died? Who is it actually helping? If we were to wait 2 or 3 days longer, maybe a week longer, why did people need to know there and then?
No,
and the other thing is, it was said in the report that the news broke out in social media, and people were. I'm not. It's really hard to describe because I want to say people were not doing the right thing for Brenda. So it was all messages of, I'm so sorry to hear your news. This is devastating. My heart's with you. Rest in peace and rise in glory. But I just think even to me, even if I had a personal friend that had died and I found out somebody else had told everybody before I did and they were part of my family, I think out of respect you need to ask the person. Yeah. So I think, because sometimes it is too hard for that person to say 1,000 times, oh, I've lost my husband, I've lost my wife, I've lost my son, I've lost my daughter. It's too hard to say. And I think it's okay to say, do you want me to inform people? Do you want me to tell people? Do you want me to take that pressure off? You're giving that person the option. And if they say no, I believe you should respect that. You should completely and utterly respect that.
Yeah, it's about being appropriate and placing that appropriate support for that person at that time in an individualized way, isn't it?
Definitely. So we send our love to you, Brenda Edwards. If you get if you see this in any sort of way, or we send all our love support, and may you rest in peace and rise in glory. But can we just go off the subject of Brenda a little bit? Rachel, do you believe grief is still very alien to us in the year of 2022?
What, us as Brits, or?
Yeah, just being human. I think anywhere around the world, really. Do you think we're conquering grief a lot more than we ever have done before?
Well, it'd be nice to not have to, wouldn't it, to conquer grief at all? But I've had sad days. I'm lucky not to be a depressive, but I can get very, very sad. But I always think that if you grieve for somebody and grieve for somebody wholeheartedly, like I've always said about my mum, she was such a wonderful woman, beautiful person. And I say grief is the price you pay for having somebody so special in your life. And it can be traumatic, yes, it can. But I myself have got a good family around me and good friends. And so I don't have that outpouring of grief that a lot of people do have, where they have to seek somebody to help them trying to get over that grief stage. And some people don't ever get over it. But I'm lucky not to have to experience that so deeply that it affects the rest of my life. But the experience that I had of having a wonderful mother like I had just gives me a smile, more smiles than it does the sad days, hopefully.
And I think it's about the therapy as well. I slightly wanted to talk about a little bit of therapy that I received a couple of years ago. So I've received a lot of therapy in the past, a hell of a lot of therapy. But the one session that I remember going to, again, not going to say who it is, but one session, and it was a very Christian-led charity because I'm a Christian, and I got a lot of support from them. And we were sat in a group. And I don't think I'll ever forget this. And it's really hard when you sit there and think about it. So I was told to write down on 5 individual pieces of paper what was really, really important to me in my life and what was my solid that I would never let go of. And we had to write these things down. And obviously, to me, one of them was God, and one was my best friend, one was my nephew. It was just different people that I'd written. And the lady said, she came round to us and she said, right, you have to give up one of those things. You now have to give up one of those things. And time by time that we gave up, and it was really difficult. And it came to the last 2, which was my best friend and God. And she said, you can only keep one of them. And that was the most hardest decision I have ever made in my life, but it made me think the order of importance, what was important to me in my life, because we say that we know a lot of people, but I think there's levels of knowing people and there's levels of love and friendship and stuff like that. But Zoe, let's come to you about grief a little bit, because as you say, you're an advocate for mental health, but do you believe, because mental health is now being pushed forward, which is absolutely fantastic, we're finally getting there. Do you think grief is very much in that closet and that we need to be pushing that forward too?
Yeah, I think like Rachel briefly touched on, about people being very British still in a lot of ways. And I think people struggle to still seek that support at times of loss due to fear of judgment. And fear of looking weak and how they've been raised, keep things behind closed doors. But yeah, absolutely, I think it is still very alien, and that's why I'm always promoting for people to speak out, don't be alone. You can access this service, ABC, because just to know that you've got that support at times like this, the appropriate support if needed.
Do you think trauma can turn into strength?
Stress? Of course it can.
Strength, like
Strength.
Well, yes,
yeah.
Strength.
Yeah, I am massive on everything you can turn from a negative into a positive. So I utilise my trauma and lived experience within my, whatever my goal is. So within my career, within my personal life, if I can help friends, family with signposting information, or by getting a job done, helping someone get rehoused, or giving them that insight of the path that they've got to follow. Yeah, absolutely. You can turn that into strength. That can be your, drive. That's my drive.
Do you think there's a difference, Kat, though, from having depression and being sad?
Yeah, there's a massive difference.
Yeah, there definitely is. I think there's so many nuances between, say, like, being depressed and being sad, and say, having anxiety and just being a little worried. And it's quite difficult to know, say, where you are and, how you fit onto those scales. And I don't think it's going back to what we were saying in the previous topic. If you haven't been there, you don't quite understand. So if you've never been depressed, you can't quite understand how someone can feel depressed. If you've never had sort of, raging anxiety, you can't quite understand how someone can feel like that, and just think, oh, well, they've got a few worries, I don't get how. It's, quite similar to what we were talking about in that sense, that if you haven't been there, it's very difficult as a human to understand it.
That is very true, Kat. But I think if you're very close to somebody who is going through such depressive anxiety as well, I think if you can see the consequences of their anxiety, the consequences of their depression, that knocks it right back home to you. And you can see, I'm not a depressive person, but I have depression in the family. And I've seen it firsthand, what it can do, the trauma. And so I've got another sense within me that knows that person can completely change. And the trauma that they go through is absolutely devastating for somebody to watch, let alone actually have it themselves as well. So I think you can have a certain amount of understanding if it's close enough to you.
Yeah, I slightly agree. I think I wouldn't be the person who I am today without the trauma that I went through. And I spent years and years, and I realise now I'm forward and I feel like I'm out of it. And don't get me wrong, I still have bad days. I was diagnosed with a mental health condition, and I still have dips and days like that go up and down. But actually, I survive them a lot better now than I did 6 years ago. One thing could throw me off a path. One little thing could send me into days of sadness, upset, don't want to be here anymore, all of that, just one little thing, where now I have to sometimes, and Zoe, I hope you agree with this, I have to sometimes look in the mirror and go, how are you dealing with this? Yeah. How the hell are you coping with this? Because I'm usually knocking on the door of PHC when this has happened. How am I coping? And I think it's just years of living it, isn't it, Zoe, really?
Yeah, and again, it's about utilising that appropriate support, identifying what works for you to manage it, isn't it? I mean, I relapse, and I'm very open about my story, and I'm very open. I've got a dual diagnosis, I've got 4, and so it's inevitable that I'm going to keep going through this cycle. It's just each time now I'm more aware and I've got more insight to me and enable me to manage that moving forward, rather than just de-escalating that situation to becoming into that crisis zone, like you said, knocking the door of PHC. So fingers crossed, that's all we can say, because unfortunately, like you also said, mental health awareness is only really just starting to come to the forefront. But yeah, absolutely, Nick.
Do you? Yeah. I think I slightly agree. But my last question, apart from one thing that I know is going to be on your gravestone, Rachel Penny, is you are the weakest link. But how would
Boring me now.
would you like to be remembered, Mrs. Penny, if you could leave a legacy of the Rachel Penny lifestyle? How would you like to be remembered?
I forgot about this one.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot now then. How would you like to be remembered, Mrs. Penny?
I'd like to be remembered as a good daughter, a good mum, good nana. That's what I am. I'm a nana, as in
Nana.
Just, yeah, did her best and survived everything, most of it. I haven't survived you yet, have I? Well, I'm barely getting past you, just barely getting past you. You'll be the end of me, I'm sure. But,
I'll be there at your funeral, love. It'll be me at the front going.
Cheery, you are. You're very cheery. Don't tempt fate.
What about Puppy Love in the corner here, Kat? How would you like to be remembered?
I think it's quite a difficult one. I normally quite struggle with sort of being self-positive. I think the main thing is just, for being who I am and not trying to be someone else.
Yeah. Very, very important. What about you, Zoe? If you could be, because you saw, I heard in a little conversation without me to Rachel Penny, you saw the Anne Robinson in Rachel Penny as well, didn't you?
I certainly did. I totally agree, Nick. Yeah.
So how would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as being the best mum and nan. I can be like you, Rach, a loyal friend and a voice for people that don't feel able to speak up.
Yeah. On mine, if I had to give a sentence, if I had to say something, and I had one thing left to say to give to the world before I closed my eyes, is I survived it, and I believe you can too.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I would like to leave behind. Actually, I'm living proof that anybody can survive anything. So that's how I would like my legacy to be. But maybe I'm just the squeaky voice guy.
What really is going to be on yours is here's another loose link.
Loose
link.
There's another loose link. As we move on to our final topic, ladies, we talk about Lincoln Cathedral will be lit purple, red, white and gold over the next month to mark the occasions like the Christian season of Lent. The iconic building will be lit with purple lighting since Ash Wednesday, March 7th, as it reflects the traditional religious colour of the season. It is used for vestments, altar fronts and other items in the church. Lincoln Cathedral will remain lit in purple until Palm Sunday on April the 10th, when Christian worshippers celebrate the triumphant entry of Jesus Christ into the world. Zoe, does Lent mean anything to you?
Nada.
Not a thing. Well, have you ever been taught about Lent, or has Lent ever been spoken about in conversation? Like when you go back to your school days, can you remember that far back?
I'm really in school a lot, Nick. I'm sorry.
Already.
I'm on to you already. What about you, Rachel? Are you a person of Lent? Do you believe in Lent? Do you celebrate Lent?
Not really. I think I've suffered enough, quite honestly. I haven't given anything up. I really do. And no, it's late this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think quite honestly, I don't think him upstairs would mind us just not doing anything this time. But we've been through quite a lot, haven't we? We've given up quite a lot. And having said that, we're probably going to give up a great deal because we can't afford to run after stuff or eat or fuel.
We might not be in a church building on Easter Day because it might take us thousands of pounds to light it up.
It might do, yes. And I'm not giving anything up.
What do you Lent to me? Let's talk about Lent a little bit. Lent to me is a reflective period. So it's the time that Jesus Christ died. So it's the time that we think about and we reflect on life itself. Do you think it's important, Kat, to reflect in periods of your life, to just put hold on your life and just reflect what's maybe happened in the last couple of months?
I think it is important. I think if you as hard as it can be, sometimes if you don't look at what's important, you can keep plodding along in the wrong direction. And in a sense, to put a sort of like silver lining on the pandemic, I mean, particularly for me, I was plodding along in one direction that I thought was the right direction. It was quite a successful direction, getting quite a lot of money coming in. And because of COVID, I changed jobs at the wrong time and ended up losing my job because of certain rules and regulations and not being able to be furloughed, and ended up going down a completely different path. Very, I literally had been since, I can remember, very academic, and the path I'm on at the moment is quite far from that. And if you'd asked me, sort of like anywhere through school, if I thought I'd be doing what I was doing now, the answer, I think I would probably fall over and faint. But actually sort of look, the period of, COVID happening and being able to reflect and sort of look at the change, because COVID slowed everything down. I wasn't actually, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I wasn't being the best person, I wasn't being the nicest person because I was so stressed out about work. And that sort of reflection helps, because you can then think, actually, am I doing the right thing? And if you don't look back and sort of think, you could, if COVID hadn't happened, if you hadn't been forced into that period of reflection, I'd probably still be plodding along on the same path and hadn't actually realised it wasn't the right one.
Do you think it's important reflection, Rachel? Do you reflect?
Yeah, I do. I'm always thinking and reflecting and seeing what could have been done better, what I could do with the future and that kind of thing. But I think that's possibly with time on my hands. But it's I think with the COVID situation, I can't believe where those 2 years have gone. I think to myself, like I was talking to a friend the other day, we went for breakfast and I said, we went last year, and she says, no, it was 2 years ago. You don't know where time has gone, do you?
No.
So it's but it happened to everybody. So it's a time for reflection and it can only be good, really, because it can bring you to certain ideas that you'd never usually have. But
and with Lent as well, there's a period in Lent between Ash Wednesday and Easter Day where you try and give something up, where you try and give like a temptation up for a couple of weeks to see how much you miss it. And I've got this colleague at work who's got I won't name the colleague, but who's got like a little grandchild, and I think he's about 6 or 7. I don't think he's very old, and he goes to a Catholic church. And she said he had a really interesting conversation with the vicar, because the vicar came into school to talk about Lent and we need to try and give something up for Lent. And he was really asking questions like, so what's Lent mean? Why do we need to give something up? And so the priest was explaining it's really important that you give something up for 4 weeks. And he literally went, I'm going to give up school. He said it so seriously. She said he didn't even laugh. You didn't even say, I'm going to give up school. I don't think that's a bad idea when you think about it, innit? But, Rachel, if I put you on the spot now and said, right, then starts today, you've got to give something up, what would you give up?
Definitely not this. No, that's my own advice.
What about you, Zoe? Could you give up some it?
Don't know if I could, but if I was going to be made, it'd be the fags.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Kat? What about giving up animals for 4 weeks? How would you feel about that?
Well, I can do that, Nick, if you pay me. As it, you know, sort of just enough to pay the bills.
Ladies, that brings us to the end of the show. It goes so fast, that hour. It's absolutely amazing. Can you, we're going to do it a little bit differently. The panel don't know this evening. I'm going to say, joining me this evening, Nicholas James was, and then Rachel Penny, I'd like you to say Rachel Penny and goodbye, Kat Clauncher, goodbye, and Zoe and you. So, joining me on the panel this evening, Nicholas James was... Rachel
Penny. Well, I wasn't listening to you, Nick. I switched off ages ago.
Who else?
Zoe Keaton.
And?
Really well.
And?
That didn't go to plan.
What was the last one? Bye, Zoe.
She'd already said it.
All right, let's try it one more time. That was a bit rubbish. Joining me, Nicholas James, was...
Rachel Penny.
Kat Cornter.
Zoe Keaton.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Zoe, you've been absolutely amazing. That was incredible, your first show. Thank you for being part. And welcome to the Loose family. You can't get rid of us now. You really can't. And Rachel, we'll see you on Countdown next week.